What's up, everybody? It's me, E-Man, and Fromily, we are almost back. Okay, it's so close. Season 4 is upon us, and we have a new trailer to kind of hold us over, I guess. But in case you missed it, you can go check out my trailer breakdown on my channel. But in addition to all of that, from the official MGM account, also gave us some recommended viewing to hold us over. They gave us a couple episodes to kind of refresh our memories. Now, I personally believe it's better for you to just go ahead and rewatch all 3 seasons. But if you're short on time, you can always go watch one of my recap videos for each season as well. Now, before we get started, let me give this nice big old spoiler alert. Okay, because this will contain spoilers for seasons 1 through 3. So if you haven't watched, for whatever reason, now's the time for you to go on somewhere, go watch it, catch up, and check this out later. Anyway, I thought I'd give you guys a little something extra to think about until season 4 drops. So I went through these recommended episodes for you to see if I could find out why these specific episodes were selected. Overall, I think these episodes will be really important because they'll have certain aspects of the story that probably had some gaps or unexplained things that happen, or just to refresh your memory in general. But I do think one of the biggest reasons why some of these episodes were recommended is because we can also find certain events in time that Julie goes back to visit. So before we get into all the recommended episodes, let's go over what we know about Julie and story walking. So for those of you who forgot, we discovered that Julie has this new ability to story walk. We saw her running in from the woods to save her father Jim from the man in yellow, but of course she was too late and she was a little too weak to change the outcome. Now, here are some other things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to story walking. We don't know all of the rules when it comes to story walking just yet. We don't know how far Julie can go back in the events of a story. And we also don't know how far can Julie go forward in a story either. Can she go forward or can she only go backwards? We don't really know yet, right? And here's the other thing. We don't know, can she only visit the events of a story in Fromville, or can she visit events in the real world as well? Now, we do know that she can interact with things. We also know that her physical body is not actually there in these different events of the story, because remember, when she goes through those ruins, she starts to have a seizure in that physical place. Meanwhile, I don't know, her mind, her other body or whatever gets to travel through different chapters of the story. I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I don't know what this is called. I don't know if that's superposition or whatever, but it's something in the physics world that can explain this, but I'm not smart enough. I don't know what that is. But anyway, we also know something else, and this is according to Ethan, that she can't change anything once the story has been told. Meanwhile, whatever happens in the story, it also means that it's because of Julie's story walking actions. So we saw this, for example, with the rope toss in season 3. By the way, when Ethan said that she can't change a story once it's been told, I think that something is interesting happening there, because this also kind of implies that there might be a storyteller. Now, who or what that storyteller could be, I don't know, but sorry, that's for another theory video for another day. Something else to kind of think about with Julie is that when she first starts to do her story walking at the end of season 3, she goes into places and times in the story that she had no idea about. So her traveling in these story events might be just as random as going into a faraway tree. She might not know where she ends up in the story or when. Now, going into season 4 and based on the trailer we just got, we know that Julie is going to start learning how to story walk. That means that she's going to make some mistakes. She's going to be jumping around until she finds a way to finally control it. Now, all right, we got everything out the way with Julie. I think that we're all on the same page with the rules and what we know and what we don't know. So let's jump into these recommended episodes. Now we're going to start off with season 1, episode 1. This is where it all began for the Matthews family. At the end of the episode, right when the tires explode, the monsters are already approaching the RV where Ethan, Jim, Boyd, and Christy are all set up. Now, Tabitha and Julie, they haven't made it to Colony House yet. This is where one of the more popular fan theories come into play. Now, recall in episode 2, we saw that young-looking monster call out to Julie and say, "Hey, Julie, don't you recognize me?"
Julie,
Hey, what are you doing?
don't you recognize me?
So what I think will happen is at the end of episode 1, Julie is going to go back and she's going to probably pop up in the woods where all the monsters are coming out. And I think she's going to bump into this young looking monster. And because she's so inexperienced with this ability, she's going to get slashed across her face by this monster. And that might be the point where Randall pulls her out. Now, remember, when we saw her at the end of season 3, she had a cut on her face. Could that have been from the young monster? Maybe, and in the trailer, we do see Randall actually holding her, which I'm assuming is maybe things get really rough or maybe things get wild. And that's where he's like, all right, that's enough. You got to get out of there. Now, based on the clip from the trailer, it is hard to see Julie's face, whether or not she does get scratched by the monster. So I do think that if it plays out that way, it'll only give us yet another rule about story walking. Not only can Julie interact with the story, but the story can interact with future Julie as well, which probably includes some consequences. All right, next episode, we have season 1, episode 7. If you recall, this is probably one of the most memorable episodes in the entire series, and that's the Colony House Massacre, where, of course, this would be a very traumatizing experience for Julie. I think we'll see her story walk to the point where past Julie goes into the faraway tree. Now, what I find the most interesting about this episode is actually in the cinematography and the camera angle that's used in that shot. I want you to go back to that episode and just take a look. Notice how Julie is all the way to the right. And when you look to the left, there's a whole lot of dead space. It's almost like they were waiting for a split camera scene to happen where future Julie might show up from the left side and watch her past self in that case. So I think that this kind of camera work is on purpose to set up for some split screen magic, again, just to kind of emphasize the whole story walking aspect. Now, one other fun little tidbit to think about, if you recall this, in this moment, before she goes into the tree, the boy in white, split second, he appears to Victor. Could he possibly also appear to the future Julie too? Maybe he gives her a warning like, hey, stop all that story walking. We'll have to wait and see. But I do think that this scene in particular is important. All right, let's move on to episode 8. Now, this episode is where we find out what happened with Boyd and his wife, Abby. Now, this was probably a recommended episode because, as we see in the season 4 trailer, Boyd is still visiting Abby's grave to talk to her, and it appears as though she got a little handsy with him as well. So more than likely, this episode will be just about making sure that you remember Abby and how this place used her again as a way to drive Boyd crazy. All right, now let's move on to season 2, episode 2. Now, this seems like a pretty obvious recommendation because this is right after Julie threw Boyd the rope and after she saw Tabitha and Victor in those tunnels. So one thing that I found interesting about this episode was that after Boyd escaped the dungeon, he followed that dog into the woods. While he was in the woods, the monsters were already walking about. However, if you remember, Boyd is suffering from symptoms due to his Parkinson's disease. One of the symptoms include impaired vision. As Boyd was looking out into the woods, all he could see were blurred figures because his vision started to get impaired. This is where it gets tricky. I would not be surprised if this was a sneaky little way to put future Julie in those woods and no one would even know if she was walking around or Story walking around in the woods, especially Boyd. So this, again, maybe this is why they recommended this episode, but I think this could be a really creative way to add her in. Okay, season 2, episode 6. I couldn't really find very much in this episode outside of the fact that this was probably one of the other most shocking moments of the series when Boyd did the unthinkable and took down Smiley with the worms. Now, my guess here is that all they want to do is just kind of remind you of that. Of course, we know later on Smiley does return, so I'm pretty sure that maybe this is really just a big reminder of like, hey, by the way, we tried killing this dude and he came back. So just to refresh your memory with that. All right, season 2, episode 8. In this episode, the cicada monster has manifested itself in the body of Smiley. Once again, I'm looking at the strange, inexplicable situations that happen, and I think there's a prime situation right here. When Boyd and Kenny go back to look at Smiley's body, remember, Boyd had put the worms in Smiley's body, and then when they went back to see the worms, they saw that the worms turned into cicadas. They locked the door and left the cicadas in that room, right? So when Boyd came back with Donna to show her the cicadas had mysteriously disappeared. So could this cicada monster that attacks people in their dreams, could it have magically disappeared on its own? Yeah, maybe, I guess. But my theory is that this is where Julie probably does some story walking, finds herself in that boiler room, opened up the door to leave, and the cicada monster takes that opportunity to fly away and escape. Just like Julie helped Boyd with the rope, she could have also helped the cicada monster escape that room and later go on to terrorize everybody, killing them, in their sleep. And I mean, talk about straight up irony. Imagine the fact that because of your story walking, you are the reason why that monster went out in the town and later messed up with you too. Oh my gosh. That would just be some mind-bending stuff if that ends up happening. All right, let's move on. We've got season 2, episode 10. This episode is pretty interesting because it's the first time we learn that it was actually possible to escape from Ville. Tabitha makes it back into the real world. She woke up in a hospital, but does this mean that someone else is going to be able to escape into the real world in season 4? Also, we learned about the evil entity. Now, the vision of Abby that spoke to Boyd, that vision had said that the entity here feeds off of hope. However, in the season 4 trailer, we hear Marielle saying something a little bit counter to that, where she says that there's something ancient enjoying our suffering.
There's something ancient here, and it's feeding off our suffering, and it doesn't stop.
So maybe season 4 will finally reveal the evil entity's true intentions. Okay, now we're up to season 3, episode 2. Jim and Kenny, they find the cabin in the woods, and this is, of course, where they find all the fresh food because the town was starving at this point. And we know from the season 4 trailer that they will be going back to these cabins often, right? And I'm sure if you saw the trailer, something else is going to be coming to that cabin too. Now, at the end of the episode for season 3, episode 2, Tabitha sees many of the paintings that Miranda painted, and also we learned more about Miranda's history before she arrived in the town. Now, I think what we should focus on is just a couple of things here. This is the first time that we also see the man in yellow in a painting, meaning that he too is part of this crazy cycle in this town. Also, I want you to pay attention to what Henry said about the townspeople. He said that they were holding on to hope, and when hope was gone, it's just them, right? They are all that they've got. Now, there's an interesting recurring theme that keeps happening here And it keeps getting thrown around in this show. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Jade brought this up in episode 10 of season 3, where he said that, things like our thoughts, our memories, or even our souls could be considered as energy, right? Like in this place, all those things could be energy. So maybe the fears or maybe the hopes of the townspeople could also be treated as energy in a similar way. After all, remember Victor's story about the children who died here. They poured their hopes into the roots of the tree before they were sacrificed. And the Abbey ghost also specifically talked about, this place feeding on hope. So maybe this is just, once again, something where we're going to have to keep that in mind. Hope, fear, all these things can just be energy, and, it can work against them or maybe even for them. All right, now let's get on to season 3, episode 4. Now there's a moment where Julie is speaking to Ethan and, he asked her like, yo, what happened? And one thing she mentioned was that she saw things. She also said that she saw things that she can't even remember. This might be yet another sneaky way for the writers to have Julie be the witness of something probably super important, but won't remember it until later on in a shocking way. And yes, we've seen this tactic before with Victor, and his shaky memory. My man didn't even remember he had a whole sister.
How do you forget something like that?
Okay, so yes, we understand that they could play this trick on us one more time, but maybe this time it'll be with Julie. Now, when it comes to this episode, what really stands out to me is that this is the point where Randall was captured by the monsters. Remember, he was gone for a long time, and we don't know what happened to him. I mean, yes, obviously, they gave him an extra long smile or whatnot, but like whatever happened to him, whatever they did to him, whatever they said to him, he don't want to talk about it, right? So, listen, if we're talking about a place that literally could get a woman who couldn't get pregnant and get that woman pregnant to only give birth to a reincarnated monster, I mean, listen, a lot of stuff is possible, right? So yes, I'm definitely suspicious now, especially of Randall. And we know that the cicada monster has not really left him alone either. It's probably been messing with Marielle too, but maybe this is just something to revisit. So let's keep an eye on Randall on season 4. All right, the last recommended episode is season 3, episode 10. Of course, this episode was a doozy. It's got to be obvious because we had so many answers, so many reveals. They gave us a lot of shocking moments. So let's kind of go through multiple, situations and moments that probably are going to play out in season 4 in some way, shape, or form. First up, in the season 4 trailer, we hear about Boyd changing. And even Acosta is calling him a monster.
You think you're some kind of hero? You're a monster.
And well, listen, all of that stems from the conversation that Boyd was having with, the dead Father Khatri, where he said that, like, this is back when they were in the tool shed, and Father Khatri was like, hey, if you go through with that torture of Elgin, there's no turning back. And this place will finally have won. It will finally break you. And well, the moment Boyd swung that hammer and smashed Elgin's hand, that was it. It was a wrap for him at that point, right? So clearly we're not going to get the same Boyd that we've always had going into season 4. And that's just kind of the point to remind you of, like, this is when the change happened for him. Then, of course, we also have the reveal of them dusty kids, of them saying Onkui all the time. We learned about the bottle tree mystery. We finally got that cracked. And, of course, that Onkui means to remember. But then Jade and Tabitha, they realize that they have been reincarnated over and over again, coming back to this town, trying to save their children over and over. So that is something, obviously, we need to keep in mind. Now, another important moment is when Julie talks to Ethan and he dubs her as a story walker, right? He then tells her that she can only revisit chapters of the story, but no one can change the story once it's been told. And of course, this obviously plays a bigger part in the upcoming season, because we already saw at the end of the episode, future Julie was trying to change the story when it came to the death of her father, Jim. But once again, there's even more stuff that we have to consider. We cannot forget that small but very important point in the story where Fatima reveals that she saw what happened at the beginning of this place and how the monsters sacrificed their children in order to live forever because it made them that promise, right? Well, if you recall from season 4, the trailer, Mariel also said how there was something dark and ancient here in this place. So maybe her and Fatima are referring to the same evil entity in Fromville. I really hope it's the same one. We can't deal with 2 evil entities. It's too much. Okay, we already got monsters in the woods and stuff. We can't do multiple evil entities. I'm tired. Okay. Anyway, we have more things, right? We also have the introduction of the Man in Yellow, future Julie story walking, and unfortunately Jim's death. This was definitely a crazy moment in the show, and I'm sure season 4, they're going to have to capitalize on that moment and show us like what happened right after that. But if some of you notice, because I know some of y'all are sharp, there's one moment that in this episode, I really, really hope you guys pay attention to. Victor brought Henry to the place where he buried his mother. But if you remember, he also buried his sister Eloise there too. Or at least that's what he thinks, right? That right there, I think, is the main reason why this show wants you to revisit the episode. This specific one anyway. Because out of all the crazy big things that we learned in this episode, it's easy to let this small little bit of detail slip through the cracks. Now, I do have a theory about Eloise, and I definitely implore you to go check that out if you haven't already. But if Eloise shows up in season 4, I think that will yet again be another big jaw-dropping moment. All right, anyway, guys, that's all the key moments from the recommended episodes that I think will play a big factor in season 4. Did I miss anything? I probably did. There's so much in this show. I don't know. Y'all are smart too. Feel free to leave me your thoughts and theories in the comments down below. And make sure that you stay tuned for more From content from yours truly. Don't forget to subscribe. It definitely helps the channel. And I don't want you to miss things as I come out with them because y'all never know. You never know what I got cooking up for you until next time. So until we meet again, I'll see you guys later. If you're new here and you like what you see, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss out the next time I drop a video. I've got more videos and reviews to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you all later.